We have Grandmaster Arjun Erigaisi, who has entered into the playing hall in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. He's on 1.5 out of 2 after a draw in the first round against Chigayev Maxim. He did beat Haik Martirosyan in an absolutely crazy encounter. And now Arjun is here with the white pieces taking on Anton Demchenko. And this is going to be a super exciting clash. Demchenko has been playing brilliantly at this event, has started off with 2 out of 2, beating Hari Krishna and Sam Shankland. And Arjun, who was meditating there, just shook hands with his opponent once he got to know he's there. And let's go. E4 has been played. And Demchenko plays his pawn to E5. Arjun brings his knight out to F3, attacking the pawn in the center. Ooh, and Demchenko plays the Petrov. Well, that's going to be quite a task to beat the Petrov, especially when a solid player like Demchenko plays it. D6, attacking the knight. Arjun comes back, knight F3. And knight takes E4 taken here. And now pawn comes up to D4. He goes pawn to D5. And bishop to D3 played. Demchenko brings his bishop to E7. It's all well-known theory here. Arjun will castle now. He does castle. The bishop comes out to F5. And rook is slid over to E1, putting pressure on the E file. Black castles here. And now knight comes out to D2. The knight comes to D6. And yeah, he's offering a trade here. Arjun moves it away, getting his knight to G3. Now it's a very symmetrical position, you know. It's kind of these positions where you feel like how to even play for a win. Pawn to C6. But Arjun is kind of playing it so confidently. Knight A6 played, maybe with the idea of coming to B4. But Arjun doesn't care about it. He goes G3. And that is maybe his preparation, a new idea. Knight comes to C7. And maybe one of the ideas of G3 is to simply put the pawn on H4. It's a useful move. He goes knight to E3. Now, one of the things that Arjun is planning to do is take the knight on D6 and put the knight on F5. That's his plan. So he does give up this bishop. Bishop takes D6. Bishop takes D6. So now there's a small imbalance on the board, something that Arjun can play for. Knight F5 would be met with G6. So he first goes H4, gaining some space on the king side. And Demchenko now goes rook to E8. How should Arjun continue here? Maybe knight F5, maybe pawn to B3. The idea of pawn to B3 is to play C4. He goes king G2. And Demchenko gets his queen to F6. And Arjun goes for that plan that we had just indicated with B4 coming, with C4 coming up. But can Demchenko go with his rook to D8? No, he goes queen G6. He's offering a trade of queens. And Arjun takes it. Queen takes G6, H takes G6. With every trade, it feels like black is coming very close to completely equalizing the position. But Arjun gains some space. Rook a D8. And here was a question, like, you know, he could have taken on C4 and then played rook a D8. But he played directly, which kind of gives Arjun this opportunity to push his pawn to C5 and gain some more space, which he does. On the flip side, of course, the d4 pawn becomes a bit weak. Bishop goes back to c7. But Arjun has a ready-made plan. He's going b4, a4, b5, play on the queen side. b6 played here by Demchenko. And Arjun now brings his rook to c1. His threat is to take on b6 and then take the pawn on c6. Pawn takes pawn. And you can take back with the b pawn, but Arjun prefers to create even more imbalance and takes d takes c5. Very interesting strategy here by Arjun. a5 pushed forward to pressurize the b4 pawn, and you want to play a3, just bolstering this pawn chain. Rook to b8, there's pressure on b4, and now the knight comes to c2, defending the b4 pawn. He goes rook c8, and I'm a bit surprised with this move. Not so sure what's his plan. Maybe he wants to go bishop d8 to f6. He goes king f8. Starts bringing the king into the game, but already Arjun seems to be slightly better now, slightly for choice, slight preference here for white position, because the knight could start putting pressure on d4. He goes knight e1. That's an interesting maneuver by Arjun. He's going knight to d3. So f6 played, and he plays his knight to d3, and you can already feel it in Arjun's body language that he's enjoying himself. There's something to play for, and it's pretty cool. King f1. And now king comes to e7. He goes rook e1, king d7, rook e3, doubling up on the e file. Rook b e1. Wow. Okay, the pressure is mounting slowly and steadily. Pawn takes pawn, taken by Demchenko. Takes back with the pawn. And he goes knight f8, ready to trade the rooks on the e file. But Arjun goes knight to d4, and now the threat is to take twice and attack the pawn on c6. So rook takes rook, rook takes rook, and rook a8 has been played. So Anton wants to get in via the a file and harass the white king. So king e2 played by Arjun. He goes in with a check. King comes back to e1. Not sure what to do here. Bishop b8. And now b5 already looks very, very powerful here. He goes king d1. Well, that's also a nice move. He's trying to get his king. Here, bishop e5. Demchenko gets a bit nervous on the 39th move and is giving away a pawn, it seems. Knight takes, pawn takes. It's not a pawn loss, because after rook takes e5, the f2 pawn is hanging, and they've crossed 40 move mark, which means both players will get additional 50 minutes on the clock. That's the best part about Grand Swiss. b5 played by Arjun. cb5 instantly taken. Rook takes d5. Check. And Arjun's clearly better, but the win is very complicated because of the less material on the board. And now the best move is rook e5. The point is, if king d7, c7, king d6, and then rook takes b5, and you're winning. But instead of rook e5, he goes rook d6, which is natural and logical. He wants to take the pawn on b5. But now Demchenko can push the pawn, keep that pawn on the board. He's thinking here, and he pushes b4. So he plays it, and now the material is even. Maybe knight b5 check. No, he goes rook to a6. And here there's a threat now of check. So black has to distract the white pieces. He goes b3. And now if check, king b8. So he takes on b3. And Demchenko plays rook f3, attacking the knight and the pawn on g3. Arjun brings his king up to c2. He takes the pawn on g3 here. And the knight goes to d4. Gaining all the squares here in the black camp. Rook g4 attacking the knight. The position is still equal. But look at the black knight on f8. It's so passive. King c3 moving up. King to b7. And goes rook a4 here. Rook takes pawn taken. And now the hope here for Arjun is king c7 is the best move. Because if check, you take here. If rook takes rook, you take the knight. It's a draw. But instead, he goes king b8. A mistake. Because now a check is possible. And then king c7 is impossible because of check. King takes c6, knight a7 check, and the rook cuts off the king, and you pick up the entire rook. So that's a very cool variation. King b8, he gives a check. So you have to go to c8 now. You can't do anything else. So he does play king c8. And now Arjun has a very strong move, rook b7. It's incredible how with little material, being a pawn down, Arjun is still winning. Rook h1. And now king comes up. That's a mistake. He should have kept his king here on c2 or king d2 in fact was the winning move. But it's so complicated. King c4. He has played the king up here. But now rook c1 check is the move. And Demchenko finds it. Rook c1. King d5. And brings his king up. And now knight to h7. But he goes rook d1, pinning the knight, which is equally good. And Arjun brings his king to c5. Check. And king to d6 played. He goes rook to d1, pinning the knight on d4. The king comes back and perhaps it's a draw now. If Arjun moves his king to the d file, but he goes to b6. Final attempt here to win this game. He plays knight e6. What a wonderful move. If knight takes e6, rook b1 check, and he wants to pick up this rook and a draw. So rook e7 played here. Attacking the knight. Knight goes back to d8. By the way, if you would have taken the knight, rook e8 was a checkmate. And now Arjun pushes his pawn to c7. The way to draw this position is to go either rook b1 check or g5. Just not worrying about anything that's going to happen here. Just keep pushing the g pawn. But instead rook c4 is a massive error. The problem with this move is that after knight b5, knight a7 and knight d6 are two massive threats. And Arjun now is totally winning. So Demchenko finally collapsing on move 61 when he actually got 15 extra minutes on the clock. Knight b5. Well, he gives a check. Believe he thought he can hold this to a draw. But Arjun has seen it through now. King to a5. Still with the threat of knight a7. So rook c5. It's kind of forced. He goes rook c5, and now an important moment not to play king b4, because then there is knight c6 check and you lose here. So king a4 check, and once again no king b3 business because of rook b4, king b4, knight c6, and you lose the rook. But king a3, fantastic, just avoiding all the mind squares, and Demchenko resigns as knight a7 check or knight d6 check, both are possible. And Arjun Erigaisi, with very little material, scores a very, very strong win. And this was really amazing performance by Arjun, where his opponent tried to be so solid, but even in that solidity, Arjun managed to find that weakness in his opponent's play and outwitted him. That's the reason why he's right up there with the best in the world. Arjun Erigaisi now on 2.5 out of 3, and in the next round faces the world champion Gukesh in what promises to be an extremely exciting encounter. And here we also managed to get a short interview with Arjun, so get to know his thoughts after this game.
Arjun, congratulations on winning today's game, third round. It was an intense game, long game. Would you like to share your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, it was okay. I had a slight edge out of the opening, and then I lost it, and it was like quite equal. But in the middle game, I think he misplayed with this. Like starting from king f8, I think he played some inaccuracies, and king e7. It may have looked natural, but it was a huge mistake, because then I got these rooks to e1, e3, and he had to put his knight on f8. And yeah, this should have been a much easier win. Like I'm so dominant. Yeah, I went for this king d1 allowing bishop e5. I'm not sure if it's the right decision, but I thought it should be good. And yeah, he found a lot of good resources which I thought were tough to find. And yeah, he almost saved it. I think when I gave c6 check instead of king b8, I guess king c7 was simpler. Rook a4, rook a6, king d6. But on what he played, maybe it gave me some actual winning chances or not, but at least what I played wasn't winning. He had to go rook, like he went rook c4. I guess knight b5, rook c6, he just missed king a5. But instead of rook c4, if rook b1, knight b5, and just g5, rook g7, g4. Here, like, it's a funny position. It feels like black should be lost, but I cannot untangle. Okay, my only try should be like king a5. But he can give like knight b7, king a6, knight c5, king a6, king b6, knight d6, king c6, and yeah, some check, and this should be holdable.
Great. Are you enjoying this time format?
Yeah, I remember in the previous Grand Prix I had long games. If this is an every tournament thing, then it wouldn't be so fun, but once in a while it's fun.
Right. And as you know that the World Championship cycle is very important, and it has a crucial stage. Apart from that, what is your personal motivation in this tournament?
Well, I think that's the motivation.
Okay, great performance today. All the very best for the rest of the rounds, and